Bienvenidos and welcome back to nuestro Papi, the podcast series about my grandfather, Pedro Enrique Prado Pina. And today we're going to be recording our fourth episode, part 2, Madurando, or the coming of age. Papi, you're here back again today. Can you please give us an update? How are we doing today?
The special thing today is March 12th, the birthday of Jennifer, my middle daughter, and she was born at the Presbyterian Hospital in a day like this in Dallas, Texas, delivered by Dr. Peter Julian, that was like a second father to me. But he also became the padrino, or godfather of Jennifer. And we wish her to have a wonderful birthday and enjoy the day with a beautiful family. I love you, Jennifer.
Well, Papi, last time that we spoke, we started to explore a lot of your coming of age years that really started when you turned 13, 1956, and brought us till about 17, high school. A lot was happening. You shared a lot of stories, and I think today what I think would be really important for folks to have a better grasp of those stories is to revisit a lot of these stories and get a little more detail. So with that, I have some questions that are going to, again, come from our last conversation. Are you ready to answer some of these?
Ready to go.
All right. Well, I think it's, again, just to orient our listeners back to where we are now. We were talking a lot about the kind of like in Cuba, the revolution was picking up speed, as they ousted the Batista government and how it impacted you in Ciego de Avila in central Cuba, and kind of what was the result of that. And there were a lot of results, a lot of impacts. So I think the first thing that I'd like to revisit is you mentioned that during the Batista government that you all were essentially you weren't able to speak freely, right? And that was something that was important for you. But you mentioned that some of your friends had gotten in trouble or perhaps arrested.
One significant thing was that in the Jose Marti Park, during the Batista time, the revolutionary people placed a bomb underneath one of the benches in the park, and there were several people hurt and one person passed away. And nobody knew who did it, but the police captured or arrested a few people, and some were my friends, trying to find out who did it. And they were taken to the cell, the jail there, and beating up like crazy. I mean, some of them end up losing their eye of the beating and broken arms and things like that. But they never found out who did it. But that's one of the things that was very impacting for everybody, not only the young people, but the bomb and how the repression that came after that. So it's something that you don't forget when it happened, especially early age.
Was there a chance that you could have been also accused or brought in jail?
I was too young. Number one, at that age, I was too young. We were not on the Batista, but we felt that, that was not normal. My parents, they talk, and it's true. Batista took over from an elected president. Carlos Prio Socarrao was elected. Batista did a coup d'etat and removed him, and then he became the dictator for the second time in Cuba. And that got a lot of people upset, and my parents, the whole thing, then the repression started. So like my parents, and I'm pretty sure most of the parents in Cuba, they wanted a democracy that they don't have to feel fear for their families or friends or anything that could happen, that be repressed again. And that was the major motivation to have then a normal democracy. And like I say, even when we were young, we were trying to help to see, and we were selling bonds. And it was not a job, it was something that we did because, we wanted to cooperate, we wanted to help. It was not a thing that we get paid for it. We did it voluntarily to help something when we can, and same thing going with my uncle, and when there was distributors outside Ciudad de Avila, in the middle of the country there, that we knew there were people there in the woods, we take food and boots and things like that, and trying to help whatever we can.
Yeah.
So everybody pretty much, except a small percentage of the Batista government were with Batista, but most everybody knew that was not the right thing to do. We want, back to democracy and freedom.
So, on that note, you talked about the fear and repression that was put in under the Batista regime during the coup d'etat and the military dictatorship. What about when you were out selling those bonds? Did you, because that must have been clandestinely. I mean, you couldn't be open about it. You told us you had them in the record sleeves. Were you afraid of getting caught?
We
Come
were, but
close?
we were always kids having little parties and we were young teenagers, so we were not suspected of getting involved in anything. So this gentleman that was with the revolution and was a neighbor of ours, and we agree, and my parents agreed. We put him inside there, and it was a bunch of us, and we got to different business. And I mean, we at that time we carried those long play because we went from one party. So what you do, you go to the place and like you are looking for something, and you give him the bond, and then you get the money, and then you go back to the party, and then later on from the party, you go home and the guy can buy and pick up the money. So you don't expose yourself. It was successful because we were kids and there was no, any suspicion that kids are going to be involved in something like that.
It's crazy. I can't imagine. But, I definitely, you sharing these stories makes it feel like I'm experiencing that. So you mentioned it wasn't necessarily a job. I'm curious, at that time, your family owned businesses that you would go support them, maybe you'd help out. But did you ever work a formal job
Yes.
at this time?
Well, I did work for my uncle, Pepin Correa, with his son is Jose Luis and Armando that passed away already. And his wife was Gloria, my mother's sister. And he had a construction business and he built houses and very good. And he was building a 3-story building. And I worked for him. And at that time, you had to, there were not those cranes now that can pour concrete. The concrete, you mix them up underneath there, a bunch of people, and then a bunch of people take them by step ladder from one floor because you had to start on. And I did that, carrying my buckets of cement. You take it and then you come back empty and fill it up again and take it back. And then part of the job was to, when they pour the concrete, that had to be fraguado. I mean, you had to put water to make sure that it becomes solid and dry out pretty good. So, and I used to work for him. I worked with my uncle too in distribution of things like that, and then on my dad's business, the cafe casine, packaging the coffee and sealing the coffee, like the little block that you see now, like Bustelo, same color, same thing, but it says casine, cafe casine. But I helped on those things.
Did they pay you or did they just give you food and a place to sleep?
No, they gave me something. Pepin Correa, the construction, yeah, he gave me good money because that was a tough thing to do. He gave me more money, but it was something for me to do and get used to know a little bit of business, how business worked with my uncle and my dad. And with Pepin was to be humble and do hard work because construction work, mixing concrete, is tough.
You mentioned that when the revolution essentially achieved their goal of supplanting the Batista regime, that resulted in the closure of your Catholic high school. Now, you were then transferred into the public school. Can you tell me a little bit, how was that? What was that process like, and how different was the public school?
Well, it was impacting because they closed the school, and I remember going there and a bunch of people outside the school chanting, get out of here, get out of Cuba, because most of the teachers we call them brothers because they were not really sacerdotes. It's all men school. We have, a basketball team, all those things, but when the crowd was around chanting those things, I walk inside the school and say goodbye to every one of them. Because I was not afraid. That was one of the things that got me always in trouble because I showed defiance. Some of the schools that were chanting were the kids that were in the Catholic school sitting in the front row because they were the best. And I was always sitting in the back row because I was the no to following the norms of I challenge things and I because I played basketball so I was untouchable until the director told me you are very necessary but you are not indispensable so you better up your grade so so I learned lessons like that and that was that process and then they closed it and already you knew that there was a different way in Cuba. So I had to finish because I only have 2 or 3 grades to finish there. And that's when the situation happened. Well, we were still having fun because there was a basketball team. So I started playing in the basketball team there because, they had in the school. So I had my thing going, but the problem was that every time Castro made a speech, they brought the speech and said you have to sign it like you
Right.
approve. And I always got up and walk out, and behind me, bunch of students did too. Mostly you come from the high school. Said, I agree with a couple of things, but I don't agree with everything, so I don't want to sign anything.
Right.
So that got me in trouble there. That until the day that they put that bomb. They never found who did it or anything like that. But when they were talking, they got all the students in the middle of the plaza there in the school, and this guy not accused me, but he said people like this are the ones who do that kind of thing. Pepillo, perfumado, teenagers that they're perfume and they're always. And I challenged him to come down and tell him in front of my face, but he didn't do it. I didn't get an actual graduation, but I got my graduation at the Catholic school because I completely there. My only signature that were missing was the Spanish. Hermano Gil and me had a little bit of confrontation many times, but I went when they were expelled. I went in the school and I apologized to him for my stupid attitude towards him and refusing to have good grading in Spanish because that was something that I did. It was my stupid action. But I learned, sometimes you can buck the system, but you also have to be careful that you don't hurt yourself. And that's one of the times don't do things that hurt yourself.
Let me ask you, Papi, just so I make sure I'm understanding. So, what happened was you were at the Catholic Marista school. Then, when the revolution happened, they decided to close that school.
Castro closed all the Catholic schools.
So now you're in the public school and you essentially get expelled from the public school because of your behavior.
Well, not expelled. I had to walk out. They told my dad, I have 3 choices: join the Communist Party, leave the country, or I'm going to jail. That's when I started working on my dad's business. I was not, given a choice to unless I become
Part of the Communist Party. So now the final clarifying question is, how did you end up graduating high school if the Catholic school was closed?
Because I have my passing grade from the Catholic school, because that was the last year of my high school, and I just finished a couple of signature for the test that they do because they text on the Catholic school and you pass it, but you gotta get the test passed at the public school. It was like a 2 graduation scene, one in the school that you go through, but I always was like that you still have to, every year pass the test over there. And I was missing like 3 things and I didn't be able to finish it. So I didn't get the graduation from then, but I got it from my high school.
From the Catholic school because of those
Yeah.
grades. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And you know what's interesting, Papi? When I was in 8th grade at the Catholic school, I was kicked out for my behavior, different circumstances, but I brought upon a lot of this myself. I had 1 month left of school, and they said basically, we will let you graduate because your grades are good, but we don't want you here. And that's when I started working at Imperial Meat.
Wow. See, history repeats itself. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I know a lot in common, just different circumstances and a different
Right,
time.
yeah,
But-
yeah.
So I want to go back to because you mentioned there was an initial bomb incident during the Batista period in the Parque Martí, which is where I asked Katie to marry me. Then you mentioned another bomb incident where a bomb was planted at the public school.
It was called Instituto, was the secondary school by La Turbina. You got to walk all the way from my house, all the way there every day, and same thing when I went going to the Marita. You do like a little stop, and El Gallito there was El Teatro Carmen. I don't know if you remember Theater Carmen, that is on Honorato Castillo. From the park, you have the La Casa Balbín, then you keep on going, and there was a theater called Carmen, and then there was a little bar in the corner there, coffee shops and things. No bar, but it was more a coffee thing, but we call it El Gallito. And we gather there and talk and things like that. And there was a girl there that I liked to wink her eye and things like that, And so then we keep on going to the school, to the high school.
Back to the bomb incident at the school. Did they find out who planted that?
No, they never find out who did it.
Do you have any inkling, or if you have to make a guess of what do you think happened?
I really don't know because I was not involved in violence or anything like that. We were a bunch of guys and we talk every day. I mean, my age in the park, and that's why we got into it because we talk. And then I refused to sign those things from favor Castro. But I don't know. To me, I don't think any of the students would have done it because we were too young to get involved in things like that. Who knows? But I might be that one of the guys that work there in the institute to have accessibility to it because you never know. We never find out who did it. And I don't know, sometimes they could have done it themselves in order to create a situation in order to scare people, to frighten people, because that's one of the tactics they use. Like Armando, he was a professor in Camagüey later on during the revolution, and he told me a story that one of the professors there said something a little bit, and the G2, the security of Castro came in, took him away, and for 3 months, nobody knew what the guy was. When the guy came back, he didn't want to talk about nothing. Don't talk to me, I don't want to talk to anybody. They frighten people by mentally making sure that you are incarcerated in your own mind.
Well, no, I understand, and we see it play out through history all over the world. It doesn't matter. It's not just a Cuban thing. It's not just an American thing. It's not just a Russian thing. This is the world in which we live and operate. But Papi, I want to end now to kind of set us up for the next episode, which is really going to jump into your preparation and departure from your home country. But one thing that, guides us in life is relationships. I want to understand just that moment when you met your first wife, my grandmother, Tomasa, because what I don't understand is which school were you walking to? And how old were you when you first met her?
In 59, I was 16, right? The revolution happened in 59, and then the school was normal for a couple of 2 or 3 years, 59, 60, 61. But your grandmother, Tomasa, she was born in Havana, in Santiago de la Vega. Her dad, Carlos del Amo, was a veterinarian in Morón, which is a city north of Ciego de Ávila. And he was doing very well there. And what happened, Castro, the first thing he did, all the veterinarians had to become part of the army. So then Carlos was transferred to Ciego de Ávila. And the school, Marista school that you visit, the street that goes east to west is República. Their house, and you see the picture of her house, is right about the middle of that block to the west of the school. And they moved in there. I learned all this after I met them because I didn't know, I was on my own thing. I walked from my home to the school, but I came from the street to the east of where she lived because then there was a girl there in the corner that we went to a kiss and things like that, and I guess I danced with her and things like that. And then the father was a big colono that owns a lot of land and things like that. And I guess he must have talked to my uncle, Benigno Brado from the Casa Balbín, and told him, hey, let's join him and her and Pedro. And when they told me that, I said, oh no, I pick and I choose who I want. Nobody gonna choose arranged marriage. They used to do in Spain, that's for them was common. So I started walking in a different path. But at that time, I was the basketball star, El Grande. They called me the Elvis Presley of Ciego de Ávila, a bunch of girls always talking about that. And so, but I started going to school to the street west of the school, and then I walked through Republic. And every time I walked through there, there were some other girls that lived there and friend of my sister too, but Tomasa, El Grande is coming. They call me the big one because I was the tallest one. So El Grande, and I hear that. So I saw her and say hello to the girls and things like that. But then I guess my sister had a perico ripiao, and some of the girls came in and brought Tomasa. That's when I met her in a perico ripiao. Perico ripiao is un prontos party. They call it. Perico ripiao means that the girls get together and play different music and they call people and they get together. But that's what it was, an impromptu party and things like that. And then there is Tomasa, and then I met her and things like that. And I liked her. So then, since I was going by, I stopped by, say hello, and then when I left school, I stopped and talked to her some more because I had more time, after leaving school, and then develop a relationship.
Just to understand, you were going to Maristas when you met her, and then,
Right.
and little by little, relationship was happening. But you were then, that whole event happened. The school got shut down, and then you were going to the public school.
Right.
All during the same time.
Then, but by that time, we have had a serious relationship. She was mi novia. Her at night, and Lilia would sit there, watch me that I don't do anything correctly, so Latin people, how that is. And then we went out and went to the carnival, and we stand and watch the parade, and with her dad and Lilia and me and Tomasa. So, we started. Then my family started playing domino, and Carlos was coming, or they play in his house. So they got a bonding would start happening.
I'll leave you with this, Papi. Katie and I met at you would call it a perico ripiado, no? We had one at our house, and I remember calling a friend, and Michael was living, we were living together then, my brother.
Yeah.
And I called a friend, said, hey, Hannah, if we have a party tonight, will you come? And I said, if she says yes, we're going to have a party. If she says no, no party. This is a mutual friend that Katie and I have. Yeah. She said yes. So immediately we called, a group of our core friends, and the word spread, and we had a party with people from 10 different countries. Michael put in a pork shoulder, a paleta, immediately in the oven. We had a big bonfire, and then that's when Katie came around the house, was because of our mutual friend and the perico ripiado. Isn't that funny?
Again, history repeats itself. Got a parallel scene going.
Yeah, so funny. Well, thank you for tuning in for another extremely exciting episode of Nuestro Papi, the part 2 of Madurando. We're going to pick back up where we left off in just a couple weeks or so, and we look forward to welcoming you back.